They said she was just another prize at a dusty frontier auction, a woman in chains with no future of her own. They said the man who bought her only paid for a body, not a destiny. But what if that single moment changed two lives forever? What if a deal made in cruelty turned into a bond written by fate itself? This is not just a Western story. This is a journey from captivity to choice, from silence to strength, and from loneliness to love. If you enjoy powerful cowboy stories filled with emotion, justice, and unexpected romance, subscribe to the channel, like this video, share it with your friends, and tell us your thoughts in the comments. Now let's get into this unforgettable story. The iron chains, scraped against the wooden platform as the Apache woman was pushed forward, and the sound cut through the crowd like a blade. Her head was held high, her long dark hair tangled by dust and wind, but nothing could hide the fierce pride in her eyes. Men stared openly, some with hunger, some with cruelty, others with cold calculation. The auctioneer's voice boomed, calling her a prize, a possession, a bargain of strength and beauty. In that moment, the desert itself seemed to hold its breath, as if fate had stepped closer, ready to choose sides. Caleb Hartman had not planned to stop at the auction. He told himself it was just business, just another necessary evil of frontier life. Yet when he saw her standing there, something deep inside him refused to stay silent. He had buried his heart years ago, sealed it beneath loss and hard work, but now it stirred like a restless horse. This was not desire that shook him. It was outrage. He saw the lie in the auctioneer's words, saw how easily people stripped humanity from another soul to make themselves feel powerful. The bidding rose fast, coins and promises thrown into the air like bullets. Caleb watched men smile as numbers climbed, imagining what they would take, what they would break. Each bid tightened his chest further. He remembered his late wife's voice, her belief that no one was born to be owned. When the price reached a level that scared away most buyers, Caleb raised his hand. The crowd turned. Silence fell. The hammer struck, sealing a choice that would follow him for the rest of his life. When the chains were placed in his hands, Caleb felt their weight more heavily than gold. He stepped closer to the woman, lowering his voice so only she could hear. He told her she would not be touched, not harmed, not used as entertainment or labor against her will. She studied him carefully, searching for deception. She had learned long ago that promises were often traps. Still, there was something different in his eyes, something steady and unafraid of her strength. The journey away from the fort was tense and silent. They traveled across wide plains and broken hills, the land stretching endlessly under the sky. Caleb rode ahead, never tying her like an animal, never shouting commands. At night, he left food and water within her reach, then stepped back, keeping his distance. She watched him as closely as he watched the horizon, waiting for the moment kindness would turn into control. It never did, and that confused her more than cruelty ever had. By the third night, exhaustion loosened her guard. She spoke for the first time, asking why he had bought her if not to claim her. Caleb answered honestly. He said the world was cruel, and sometimes the only way to stop cruelty was to step into its path. He said he did not know what her future would be, but he knew what it would not be. His words were simple, unpolished, but they carried truth, and truth has a sound that cannot be faked. When they reached his ranch, she expected another prison. Instead, she found open land, quiet hills, and a small wooden house worn by time but cared for with respect. Caleb removed the remaining chains and placed them on the table, telling her she was free to leave whenever she wished. The gesture stunned her. Freedom offered without demand felt dangerous, like a test she had not agreed to take. She stepped outside, breathing deeply, feeling the earth beneath her feet without iron to remind her of loss. Days passed, then weeks. She stayed, not because she was trapped, but because something unseen tied her to this place. Caleb never forced conversation, never asked her to be grateful. Slowly, she began to help around the ranch, choosing her tasks, moving with the confidence of someone reclaiming control over her life. Caleb noticed her strength, her intelligence, the quiet way she observed everything. Without realizing it, he began to look forward to her presence, to the sound of her footsteps, to the calm she brought into his long, lonely evenings. The land tested them both. Storms rolled in without warning, and one night a group of outlaws passed too close to the ranch. Caleb prepared to defend his home alone, but she stood beside him, fearless, holding a rifle she had learned to use in silence. In that moment, he saw not someone he had saved, but someone who had chosen to stand with him. Respect grew where pity had never existed, and something warmer followed close behind. She told him her name under the stars, a name that carried the echo of mountains and rivers, of a people who refused to disappear. Caleb listened, truly listened, and shared his own past in return. Two broken histories met in the quiet dark, not to compete but to understand. Neither of them spoke of love. The word felt too small, too fragile for what was forming between them, yet fate had already begun its work, weaving two paths into one, whether they were ready or not. And as the fire burned low that night, with danger still lurking beyond the hills and the past breathing down their necks, both of them felt it. What began as a transaction forced by a brutal world was turning into something no one could buy, sell, or control. The desert had taken much from them, but it was not finished yet. The greatest trial and the deepest bond were still waiting. Just beyond the horizon, the following weeks brought a fragile rhythm to their lives. But the frontier never allowed peace to last. Word traveled fast across the plains, and whispers began to reach nearby towns that an Apache woman was living freely on Caleb Hartman's ranch. Some spoke with curiosity, others with anger. To many, she was still property that had slipped through the fingers of men who believed power was their birthright. Caleb sensed the shift before it arrived, the way animals do before a storm. One afternoon, riders appeared at the edge of the land. Their posture was wrong, their smiles thinner than knives. They claimed she had escaped lawful ownership and demanded she be returned. Caleb stood between them and the house without raising his voice. He said she was free, that no law gave them the right to take her. Laughter followed, sharp and ugly. One man reached for his gun, and before the moment could break into blood, she stepped forward. Her voice was calm but carried the weight of generations. She spoke of stolen land, broken treaties, and the lie of ownership. She told them she chose where she stood and who she stood beside. The riders hesitated, unsettled not by her words alone, but by the certainty behind them. They left with threats hanging in the air, promising to return with force. When they were gone, the silence felt heavier than gunfire. That night, she packed her few belongings. She told Caleb she would not bring danger to his door, that her presence would only invite violence. Caleb listened, then shook his head. He said danger followed all of them in the West, and running from it only taught it where to find you next. He told her this was her home as much as his, not because he had paid for her freedom, but because she had chosen to stay. The words settled between them like a vow neither had planned to make. Trouble came sooner than expected. At dawn, gunshots shattered the stillness. The riders returned, more of them this time, fueled by resentment and greed. Caleb and the woman fought side by side, not as owner and rescued soul, but as equals defending what they believed in. Dust and smoke filled the air. Horses screamed. When the shooting stopped, the attackers fled, leaving silence and shaken ground behind them. In the aftermath, wounds were tended and truths exposed. Caleb was injured, a bullet grazing his side. She stayed with him through the night, her hands steady, her eyes fierce with fear she did not try to hide. In that vulnerable space, the walls between them finally fell. She told him about her family, taken and scattered. He told her about the emptiness that had haunted him since his wife's death. Pain recognized pain, and instead of turning away, they leaned closer. Recovery was slow, but healing changed them both. The land seemed different now, not just a place to survive, but something to protect together. Neighbors who once watched from a distance began to see her not as a threat, but as part of the ranch. Some never accepted it, but enough did. Respect, hard-earned and fragile, began to grow. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fire, she asked Caleb why he never tried to claim her, even when the world said he could. Caleb answered without hesitation. He said love taken by force was not love at all. He said he did not want a woman who stayed because she had nowhere else to go. He wanted someone who chose him freely or not at all. She looked at him for a long time, then reached for his hand. What followed was not a sudden romance, but something deeper and stronger. Trust turned into affection. Affection turned into devotion. They learned each other's silences, each other's fears, each other's strength. The frontier tested them again and again, but every trial only tightened the bond fate had begun weaving the day they met. When they finally married, there was no grand ceremony. Just open land, a few witnesses, and a promise spoken under the endless sky. Some said it was impossible, others said it was wrong. But the West had never been built by people who obeyed expectations. It was built by those who dared to choose their own path. She was no longer the woman bought at an auction. She was a wife, a partner, a force of will who reshaped the meaning of freedom. Caleb was no longer the lonely rancher hiding behind duty. He was a man reborn by love he never thought he deserved. And so the story spread across the plains, carried by wind and firelight. A story that began in chains and ended in choice. A reminder that fate does not care how two souls meet, only what they choose to become when they stand together. Time passed and the land slowly accepted them as one. Seasons changed, and with each passing month, their bond grew stronger, shaped by shared work, shared silence, and shared purpose. The ranch was no longer just a place of survival. It became a home built on mutual respect. She brought her knowledge of the land, her understanding of weather, plants, and horses, while Caleb brought patience, protection, and trust. Together, they created something neither could have built alone. The past did not disappear, but it lost its power. The memories of chains, loss, and loneliness faded into lessons rather than wounds. Neighbors who once doubted began to see the truth in their union. Some admired it quietly, others spoke of it openly, but no one could deny the strength they carried together. They stood not as symbols of controversy, but as proof that choice mattered more than origin. On quiet evenings, they sat beneath the wide sky, watching the sun disappear beyond the hills. There were no grand speeches, only understanding. She was no longer defined by what had been taken from her, and he was no longer defined by what he had lost. Fate had crossed their paths through cruelty, but love had kept them together through will. Their story became one told by travelers and whispered by firelight. Not a tale of ownership, but of freedom earned and shared. A reminder that even in the harshest world, humanity could still choose compassion. And long after the dust settled and the echoes of gunfire faded, their legacy remained, written not in history books, but in the hearts of those who believed that destiny could be rewritten.